Hell is where God says, have it your way. If someone will not have God, then they bring their own hell with them.
If Christ is Lord, then he rules over how I watch TV, how I treat my children, how I treat my neighbors. He rules over everything.
Oh, you're breaking his heart. No, he's gonna break you.
What's wrong with you people? I mean, this is what's wrong with the Christian church today. We don't know who God is.
Give us some men who know the truth.
Put on the full armor of God and pray, 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 and pray.
Officer, you are not engaging in activity in constitutional behavior. You don't know the law, and yet you pretend to represent it.
Five Solo Studios presents Reformed Radio.
All right, welcome back to Reformed Radio. It's been a minute, but we're excited to be back, and I think we have a pretty cool show for you guys. We're coming right off I guess we're on the tail end now of Halloween, and we thought we would talk about fear and horror. And from a kind of a Christian perspective on what should a Christian look at horror as? Like, how should we filter out the world around us that is infatuated with horror? Like, how should we deal with that? So that's what we're going to talk about today. As usual, we do have Pastor Mark on with us. Hey, Pastor Mark. And we also have a special guest. Oh, no, we don't. Sorry. If you want to be on the show, you just reach out to us, and we might consider putting you on.
Well, the Pope of Dad Jokes couldn't make it because his power's out, but he did tell me that he loves ceilings. Because he's a ceiling fan.
Oh,
all right.
Okay. He's here in spirit.
He's here in spirit.
So I get a lot of questions from different people, different friends and family and whatnot, about Halloween, about how about fear.
I mean,
about death.
you mean Reformation Day, right?
All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day, and
Reformation Day.
Yeah, and this isn't about talking specifically about if you should celebrate Halloween or not. I mean, that's your personal conviction. I'm not going to tell you what to do or what not to do. But I'd like to kind of talk about, I guess before we get going on that, is talking about fear. What does the Bible say about fear? Because I think at the very core of all of this, the core of horror and Halloween and the spirit of all this stuff is fear, right? And how do we deal with fear? And so I brought a couple things from Scripture that I'd like to kind of talk about, because as I've gone through Scripture, and there's hundreds of references to fear, there's different kinds of fear. There's different categories, so to speak. And so here we go. We have 1 John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment. And whoever fears has not been perfected in love. And so here we see there's this kind of a fear of punishment, right? And so then we have Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One and is insight. So now we have this kind of fear is about honor, respect, a kind of reverence, right? And then we have Psalm 112:7. He is not afraid of bad news. His heart is firm, trusting in the Lord. And I think that's we could kind of categorize that as kind of a fear of consequences, a fear of maybe being reprimanded in some sense as well. And then you have Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I think we could kind of categorize that as a fear of loneliness, a fear of abandonment. And then we have 2 Timothy 1:7. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. So I think we could kind of say that's kind of a fear of helplessness, which also kind of ties to anxiety, which we've had a whole show on that one. So feel free to go back into the archives for it. And then we have Hebrews 13:6. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? And I think this one we can kind of categorize as a fear of pain, bodily harm, death, something along those lines. And so we have some different categories to kind of look at the world with. But one thing I didn't see when I was going through scripture is the fear of falling out of a tree, the fear of a jump scare. Like, how do we as Christians deal with that kind of a type of fear or thrill seeking, right? How do we deal with that? Is that an appropriate thing for us to do? Should we be going out and risking our lives just for this sense of fear, that drive us? Should we be going to, like we're talking about Halloween, haunted houses? What is appropriate for a Christian to do? So do you have any thoughts on any of that before we get going?
Yeah, I always look at fear as something that's unnatural to us because it starts at the fall. So before the fall, before sin, right, there is no fear. Adam and Eve fellowshiped with God right there in the garden, and there's no sense of any kind of fear. But what happens the minute that they fall?
Fear.
That fear, all of a sudden, they're sore afraid. I love that phrase from the old King James. The disciples were sore afraid when they saw something very unusual, right? Something
they were
eerie
real
to
sore
them.
at that point, right?
So Adam becomes fearful after the fall. So it's an unnatural thing. So you would assume in heaven there's no fear, for example, right? In the senses that you're talking about, there still be the respect and the awe.
And I guess that was one of the things that kind of got reversed with the fall. So the good fear that they were supposed to have in the sense of reverence for the Lord, well, now that's something they struggle with.
Yeah, so you read a great verse, perfect love casts out all fear, and that's kind of the idea there. In this program of redemption and restoration, one day we're going to be glorified and without that kind of fear because perfect love casts it out. And it's always good to keep in mind that these things are going to be unnatural for us, right? Sounds like this other category that you're talking about, though, sounds kind of like an adrenaline rush, like kind of getting hooked on some kind of activity that gives me that chemical reaction of excitement or something of that nature, right? So I'm assuming you're not talking about jumping out of planes and stuff. It seems like that would be okay, but maybe doing harmful things to chase that type of feeling. I mean, getting on the highway and going 180 miles an hour, or something that's dangerous, right? That seems inappropriate.
Yeah, and I think that kind of brings up the line of recklessness, right? So I think there is something to consider that with. As far as that category of fear goes, you have to have wisdom.
Right.
You can't be reckless and endangering your life. And I mean, here's a big one, and this might make people upset, but I think it's true, is if you are responsible for a family, you probably shouldn't be jumping out of an airplane.
Yeah, probably
If you're responsible for a family, you have to be careful and not to be reckless and more flippant with your life because of the responsibilities you have. So you're taking a chance that's unnecessary,
right,
for some kind of thrill, right? In this sense, you're getting this this fear that you're getting. You're overcoming this fear. You're going through this fear to jump into it. And I'm going to say I don't think that's healthy.
Right.
I think that's an unhealthy way to do it.
I do too, although for young men, I think kind of the adrenaline or fear that would come in a contact sport is probably pretty healthy. Like being on a football team or something where you're pushing yourself physically, and there's a certain amount of that you get being involved in contact sports. I think it's very healthy for young men to kind of bring them upright.
Yeah, and that's also a much lower risk.
Yes,
you're not,
yes, yeah.
A young man is not going to be as responsible as
right.
we are. Right, we have families.
Exactly. Well, exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think that's very reckless.
I don't either.
It's calculated risk, right? We don't need to live in a bubble,
right?
But we also see one thing I didn't mention here, but there are fear tactics in Scripture that are used by God's armies, by God Himself, right? He strikes fear into His enemies. that's something that we can use and we can take and use in a God honoring way. Like if we're in war, or let's bring it more close to home. If somebody is invading your home, I think it'd be a good thing for you to scare them. Right,
Yes,
you want
absolutely.
them to be afraid of you, and more than you are of them. Right,
Correct.
so that would be a good way to implement fear. But most of the time, when we read Scripture, it's saying, "Fear not." Right, don't be afraid. And it's have the spirit of peace. And so that's where this kind of gets so fuzzy, and especially when you bring it into like Halloween. So one of the big emphasis on Halloween is this fear. Like people are trying to scare children all the time. Like there's a guy that's on my street who has the creepiest house. I mean, it's just covered in just big old skeletons and zombies.
Does he watch this podcast?
No, he doesn't.
No, okay. I'm going to send it to him.
It would be great if he would, you know.
I think I know which house you're talking about.
It's hard to miss. It's the only one that's like that.
That's the first time I saw those giant skeletons was driving to your house. And that, y'all have big old tall fences. That thing must be close to 10 feet tall. And that skeleton was over it by 4 or 5 feet. I was amazed by it. I'd never seen anything like
They've
it.
apparently multiplied.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, there's more of them now. But yeah, and so the whole and there's people we know who their children have actually reached out to their neighbors on their own accord and said, "Hey, the stuff you have in your yard scares us. Could you please put that away?" You know, and that's what they want. They want to scare people. There's this obsession that they have, and I think we'll get into that in a second. But if you are not under a conviction to not celebrate Halloween, what is appropriate for a Christian to do? What if you're going to celebrate Halloween in some form? What is appropriate and what is not appropriate? Like where does fear kind of fit in with this whole holiday?
Well, I just think horror in general. Can we define what horror is right quick before we go
So
first?
I got Webster's definition here because, Webster knows everything. We have, it's painful and intense fear, dread, or dismay. Another way of saying it is intense aversion or repugnance or repulsiveness.
So I think there's good uses for fear and horror and bad uses of it, kind of like with almost anything. But I think when you have an unhealthy fixation on certain things, then it becomes bad. Okay, or like the macabre, right? The unhealthy fixation where my heart just constantly reaches out for the gruesome.
Yeah, the macabre, the grotesque.
The grotesque, yeah. It's
gore.
Just gore. These kind of things.
Yeah.
If I'm just fixated on it, like there's some kind of drive for it, like I just look it up all the time on YouTube or on the internet, or I want to turn my house into some really macabre type thing. I think if there's a fixation there, something's wrong. That's what I think. That's one category. Or the occult. If I have this drive for the occult, something ain't right.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah. And I think if we kind of stand back and look at our culture, that has been what's happening. When I was a kid, Halloween was a very different thing.
Very, very different.
Very different. And it was just, kids just trick-or-treating. A few people had some decorations out, and it wasn't grotesque.
No.
It was just like, here's a Charlie Brown.
Man, I'm so old that I was still in you put a sheet on and cut 2 holes in it, and that's how bad it is.
Yeah, and that's not what we're talking about anymore. I mean, just looking at my neighbor's house, I mean, that is not what I would have experienced as a child. And that's the norm now. There's been a shift in our culture towards this morbidity, like this drive for death, right? I mean, we say it all the time. It's a culture of death.
Culture of death.
And they love death so much that they celebrate it and have it on display. And all of its macabre glory. And so that's kind of where our culture has gone. And so I think what you're saying is I think as Christians, we need to be careful to not become numb to that.
Right.
It's real easy, as Pastor Chris says all the time, if you're not being dedicated and instilling the word, you're going to go the way of the culture.
Every time.
And if you're not putting those blinders on and focusing on what the word has to say and saying, don't be filled with fear, put your focus on Christ, on life, then you're going to go the way of the culture, which is towards death and this Gothic kind of appreciation for it.
Well, that's a good point about the Gothic too. Why would I be consumed by the Gothic? Why would I be?
I mean, it's just what drives our culture now, because our culture. So here's the deal: the culture threw off God, right, and went towards atheism, humanism, secularism, right, and they're finding that doesn't do anything. It's not enough, because everybody knows. Well, we all know as Christians that you need Jesus, right? That is what you need. And because you're not getting that fulfillment in just looking at yourself and materialism and all that, you're now going to the occult, right? You're going to New Ageism. You're going to witchcraft and paganism, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to those ceremonies and reaching out for, well, honestly, you're reaching out for demons, right? And so what do you get?
We tried and tried and tried to tell the new atheists that getting rid of Christianity would not end up in this rational, logical world in people's hearts, that the paganism would rush in.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's
we
what it's
said
doing.
And that's exactly what, and I think they have come around to see it, because a lot of them have started to say, you know what, maybe cultural Christianity isn't so bad thing, after
right?
all.
Yeah. I've heard that too. But I think that's where Gothic themes come from. And when I was a kid, I really noticed it in high school, and that was kind of when it was starting to dry, but it already had been coming.
Yeah.
It just wasn't as popular. And I don't just mean goth kids, you know.
Right.
That's not the only thing. It's just this fixation on this darkness, on really on death.
Kind of celebrating in it or taking joy in it somehow, or finding pleasure in in darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because of where we are, we're in South Texas, or middle of Texas on the east side. We're close to Mexico, is my point, right? And so we have a lot of Hispanic people, and one of the big things that they celebrate is the Day of the Dead. And what is that all about? Death, right? Ultimately, I think that one's more about ancestor worship, and that's one of the biggest problems with it. But it's also a huge focus on death and that morbidity that we're talking about. And so we're kind of getting hit with it like double whammies. We have two different cultures that are bringing this in. And so the point is, we as Christians need to look at the culture and say, that's wrong. When you see that stuff on display, I think we should be saying in our minds, that's gross, that's grotesque. I need to be telling my kids, hey, that's grotesque.
If it's grotesque, it should be grotesque.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be that way to you. So when you are going through these situations and when you are dealing with the Gothic oppression upon you, you recognize it for what it is, and you're not just numb now, indifferent to it.
So maggots are grotesque.
They should be.
Because they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got you.
And so
I'm tracking with you.
I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we look at Halloween. And so if you're going to decorate and do the things, is that where your heart's at? Yeah. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I go and trick or treat with my kids. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. I don't have a conviction for that. We don't do anything inappropriate. They're not dressed wrong.
Right.
It's a fun thing. We're with them. We just go and then we go eat. It's not a big deal. But we don't decorate or anything like that for it. And this year we didn't even decorate for fall, so we fell behind. So everybody can be a little different, but I think that's something you need to keep in your heart is, am I celebrating death? What was the quote you had from MacArthur?
The John MacArthur, we should not be entertained by the sins for which Christ died. I believe that's a good paraphrase. Yeah.
Like, why would I celebrate in death and darkness when Jesus is the light of the world? Right? Like, that doesn't make sense. In that regard, that doesn't make sense.
In that way, yeah.
Yeah. Good. So
there is a good way to celebrate death, right?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna get into that. And I'm excited about it.
I got a couple more categories here to add to those. Anything that's just gratuitous violence. All right. There's a lot of violence in the Bible. We can talk about horror in the Bible in a little bit. But if something's just gratuitous, right? Like a movie where they're just killing each other the whole time, there's no really any point to it. See, that there's something wrong there. So I would think if that's where your heart, it just wants violence for no reason or point behind it, no redeeming qualities going on, no restoration, no redemption, it just doesn't have any kind of point at all, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
So if I see a house and, just somebody's just having their throat slit for no reason, it's just gratuitous violence, and it doesn't seem to be coherent with the Christian worldview. So gratuitous violence, gratuitous evil, evil that's just there for no purpose, right? Pain and suffering, pointless pain and suffering. What are you doing with that? Blood and guts for no reason, those kind of things. I thought you brought up a good point by kind of pointing out D-Day and that scene in Private Ryan where there's a lot of blood and guts, but that's a historical reality. That's not gratuitous. It's not
and it
pointless.
doesn't leave you there.
And
right?
it doesn't leave you there.
It exposes the darkness that they went through.
Right.
But along the story, it's telling you what happened, and there was a lot of redeeming qualities for having to go through that. And
A lot of
it's not
courage.
easy.
A lot of courage to get off that boat and do that. But that's a historical reality, and you cannot describe this world accurately without horror. Believe it or not, you can't do it, because this fallen world is filled with dread and fear and pain and all those things. So to act like it's not there is just a lie.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about having evil for the sake of just having evil.
Yeah, that's I think if you have a desire to strike genuine fear into others just for kicks, that's a problem. That's a problem with your heart. You need to go and repent. You need to really deal with God and have him work with you, because that is not edifying to God. And that's not edifying to your brothers and sisters or your family or whoever, what the situation is. That's a sign that there's something going on that you need to get checked out.
If I sneak up on my wife and poke her and she yells, does that count?
Is that striking genuine terror and
horror? I guess it's not genuine horror. All right, good.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between me coming up behind my kids and, jump scaring them.
Oh, so you do know what I'm talking about. Yeah, right.
It's fun sometimes.
Yeah, sure it is.
But if you're doing it all the time, that could be a problem too. And I think that would be a different situation. I think that's a different problem. But yeah, what you were saying, talking about horror in that regard, like there's real horror in this world. And the Bible doesn't shy away from that. We talked about, you see it in the military incursions, but I think more vividly, and probably something that we are missing so much in our current evangelical culture, is the horror of God's condemnation. When you are under God's wrath, before you have the gospel, like the bad news, right? That should make you terrified. That should be horrifying for somebody who's under that wrath. And is it wrong for a Christian to use horror in any way to edify God? Like, is it wrong to say, like, this is where you're at? You're under the wrath of God, and this is a terrible thing, and you're going to go to hell. There's these awful things that could happen. Is that wrong to use that because it's a fear tactic?
Well, I brought a few scriptures out of the Bible that just have horror in it because the Bible's filled with it, and I think God uses it not only in the eternal realm, which is certainly the case. Hell is a horrible thing, is it not? It is a horror. But he even talks about it in this temporal reign for disobedience. Let me read you this.
Yeah, go for it.
This is quite stunning out of Deuteronomy. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but flee from them in seven, and you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. Your carcasses will be food for all the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and there will be no one to frighten them away. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt and with tumors, festering sores, and the itch from which you cannot be cured. The Lord will afflict you with madness, blindness, and confusion of mind. At midday you will grope about and on it goes.
Yeah, that's pretty macabre all on its own.
That's horror, see, just for disobedience. There's people. So the Bible's kind of full of all this. I mean, think of the horror of the Passover. Okay, here comes after 9 plagues, which is plenty of horror.
Right.
Oh, it's the river turning to blood.
Fish dying. Everything getting destroyed.
But all of a sudden, here comes this avenging angel, and it's going to strike down the firstborn of Egypt. So we have to slaughter an animal and take blood and put it over the door frame, the doorpost, and stay inside at night because of this horror that is occurring outside. See, that's the Bible is full of a lot of things that, by our definition, cause dread and fear. See?
I mean, the Lord himself is called a dread warrior.
Dread warrior, right on, right? What is the flood? That's horror.
Yeah, sure is.
See, that's horror. Can you imagine?
It's just walls of water coming at you.
Can you imagine? That's horror.
Ground shaking. Yeah.
Ground shaking. I just wonder sometimes how Noah and his family felt inside that boat. With that horror going on outside. So yeah, I mean, I was reading, thinking about this. I was reading in Revelation about those locusts.
Oh yeah.
Kind of the face that kind of looks like a man, and they don't kill people. They sting them and torture them and keep them alive and keep hurting them over and over. It's very horrible. It's, that wall of blood that is, John says, is taller than a horse's, I think, head, right? It's very, very
it's
tall.
real high.
Real high. And the length of it,
6 feet,
length of Israel, of blood.
Yeah.
That's a very horrible scene.
Yeah.
Very dreadful. And the Bible employs it all the time. And I think that's because God always tells the truth, and you cannot accurately describe this fallen world without horror.
Yeah.
I don't think it can be done.
And I think that applies to the gospel.
I do. I most certainly
in
do.
order for you to have the good news, you have to know about the horror of the bad news, right?
Yes.
And so if you're just going to tell everybody that God's your best friend, BFF, you'll be good, everything's fine. Well, then you've missed it, right? You've missed the horror of your situation.
Exactly.
And if you haven't dealt with that, that might be something you need to go and check with yourself. Like, do you understand what you were saved from?
How bad my sin is. It is a horror.
Yeah, and this isn't to leave you in that state, right? Because the bad news is only there so that the gospel, the good news, takes you out of it.
And I think this works with what you're talking about on Halloween and this obsession with death anyway, because horror, one of the ways you can look at that whole question is horror works well and works best when it has goodness and redemption, pitted against the darkness. If it doesn't have that, then something's wrong. Then it's gratuitous violence.
Yeah.
Then it's gratuitous evil. We're just doing this because it's evil, and we have this draw towards evil. But horror is such a great way to let the light shine in the darkness. See, because when does light shine more than in the darkness, right? It really works good there. So if you're engaged in something that's horrible, you need to make sure it has some kind of redemptive and restorative qualities that are going on with it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it shouldn't be leaving you in that state.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's failed, and it's not worth your time.
Then it's hell.
Yeah.
Then it's hell.
Yeah, because but even for us, we see hell and we have the contrast to it, so it's a benefit for us. But if you're not, then it's like you're in there, and
it's outer darkness.
Yeah, it's awful.
Horror without redemptive quality is outer darkness. It's wailing and gnashing of teeth. Okay?
So how do Christians utilize horror? How can we do that in our movies and books or whatever?
I think we can do it quite well, and because really, you think of Frodo in the cave with that giant spider. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with it? What was her name? Mother or something? I can't remember.
No, I don't. Don't ask me names.
Yeah. So
I
he's
got
in
Frodo.
there.
I'm good enough there.
That's just a pure horror scene.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Giant spider chasing him. It's dark. He can't see anything. And he pulls out that light because light shines, and may the light shine in a dark place. Right? And you just get the real sense of good and evil going on in this war between good and evil. Right? It's, I love your shirt. The light will find you. You know, that's just almost like the Gospel of John that keeps talking about darkness and light, right? And I think there's great ways. I myself have written a horror novel, and it just, that horror gives you such a good way to explore the difference between good and evil, and really make good shine in the darkness. There's really a place for it. I brought some good examples of things that I think are decent horror that allow us to explore themes about this world. Like, if you've ever read The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, total horror writer, right? Poe is. But in The Raven, you get this, he uses the horror to explore what loss is like if you are hopeless and don't know God. See, that's kind of what's going on in this poem, you know, that man has lost his love, the love of his life, and he's grieving, and that raven shows up, and it's just the horror themes. And he's crying out to that raven, you know, and the raven keeps saying, nevermore. That's hopeless. That is horror showing the hopelessness of not having the light of God.
Right.
See,
right.
That death is this thing that is a destroyer, and it reigns, and there's no defeating it, and we are all hopeless in this world if we don't have God. That's the contrast.
Fear not, for I am with you, even into the end of the age.
Yeah.
And that's the darkness is there that Christ now shows the light of. So if you're not with Christ, that's a very real horror. That's a very real reality that you can be in if you do not have Christ. And that's what everybody without Christ is. You know, they are in that state of horror, and they're just trying to keep busy, trying to keep their minds off.
In this world there is horror, right? And I love that line from the Raven. Is there balm in Gilead? Right out of the Old Testament. Is there balm in Gilead? Tell me. He's imploring that raven. That raven says, nevermore. Hopelessness without God, see, without the balm of Gilead, which is Christ, see. A beautiful way to use horror. Okay. Haven't you ever felt up against the wall and hopeless, right? And so that, knowing that is not the case for us, it's really exemplified in that poem. But there's other ways you can do it. What about like a Frankenstein or something? All right, there's horror. That's pure horror, and it gives you a way to look at man's tampering with nature in a way that he ought not. See, that he's trying to be God.
See a consequence for an action, right?
So you can really bring that out in a way that is very figurative and very powerful, right? I mean, you can have a movie where The Day After Tomorrow or whatever, where we bring on global warming or whatever, and you can just do it straight out if you want to. But I think it's way more powerful to frame it in something like a Frankenstein, where here's this mad scientist tampering with things we ought not tamper with. We are not God, and God is God over life and death. See, and you can really get that contrast there.
Yeah,
in a very powerful way, I think. How about Dracula, horror figure, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The horror of immortality that is godless. Think about it. One of the worst things that could ever befall a person is to be immortal and godless, to live forever in a hopeless state.
Yeah.
Dracula, a very tragic character in a lot of ways that way. And we have people like that in the Bible, and it's called hell.
Yeah.
I'm immortal, and I'm going to be godless. It's the worst fate that could happen to somebody.
Yeah.
See? And you see that in Dracula. That's why vampires, they kind of get tired of being vampires after a while.
Yeah.
The same thing. I haven't seen the sun in 400 years. They just.
It's very rare to hear a story with anybody who's eternal, immortal, who's not plagued with despair and depression.
Yeah.
Because they usually don't want to stay living on forever.
Yeah, if they're godless. Now, we're going to heaven, and immortality is going to be fabulous, right? We're not going to be bored. Y'all stop all that, right? If you get bored, God can let you take a 400,000-year nap, and you can wake up and you won't be bored anymore, okay? And it's still, compared with eternity, is nothing, right?
Right.
Let's quit all that nonsense.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're not. Boredom is a product of the fall, right?
Right.
You won't be bored.
You will not.
You will look at the blade of grass and be in awe. And it will never grow tired of it.
And never grow tired of it. Well, how about Misery? Are you familiar with that horror? James Caan, Kathy Bates. She's his #1 fan. He's an author.
Yeah. I can't tell you I've seen it, but I've seen the popular scene.
Well, that's flat out horror, and she has him trapped in that room because she pulls him out of a car wreck. And I'm your #1 fan. She wants to keep him there. Well, that is horror exploring the evils of idolatry and obsession, right? That we see, and it gives you a very powerful way to frame it and say, maybe I ought not to be idolatrous and obsessive, in a very powerful word picture, so to speak.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good theatrical ways of using horror, but I think the theme here is you usually are using horror to frame a situation. Like, this is what happens if you do this. This is a situation with this or X, Y, or Z. One thing I really appreciated, I'm not saying everybody should go watch it, but Stranger Things has a lot of really good horror elements to it. And one is the Upside Down. Like, you have this whole world, which they call the Upside Down, which is full of darkness. Like, it is dark and it's dying and it's death. And, that's where the monsters are coming from and all this stuff. And I think you can look at that as a contrast to the upside, the regular world. So you have a contrast of, this is kind of what hell is like. This is what you have in heaven, right? I'm not saying it's an exact representation, but you have that contrast and you're seeing that this is evil. This is horrible, but this is wrong, right? And then this is the good and this is the positive, and ultimately you're led to a point of redemption. So I'm not saying everybody needs to go watch it, but I'm saying that's a really good way of utilizing it to state that you have different areas, different level. This is a place that you could be in, contrasting the reality,
right,
the spiritual reality that we're in. Because there is a real spiritual war going on right now that we don't see,
right?
And these horror films and horror stories in our, I make up stories for my kids all the time. Unrealized book writer, lots of ideas, but I gotta put them down. But I'm not afraid to tell my kids bring up these horror elements. It's appropriate for them at their level. I don't want them to ever have nightmares, but like to deal with real things that happen and real things that a hero has to overcome, or a real situation, and how do they deal with that?
And there's that redemptive element.
Right. Yeah. Never leave them there.
Right.
You don't want to leave them there. That I failed as a storyteller if that's my case, but to use that to shine on the truth of, mostly every time I try and do this, I want to try and emphasize something from Scripture. I want to try and shine the light about Christ is my goal in most of these stories, but the redeeming quality, right? If you don't have a redeeming quality, it was a waste of your time.
Right. And didn't Christ face the ultimate horror?
Yeah, cross.
The ultimate horror. And he's in the garden and he's sweating blood, right? Because he's facing the ultimate horror and the wrath of God and dying for the sin of the world.
Yeah.
See, and that's that redemptive element that makes it okay. See, it is not gratuitous. It is not just violence for violence sake. I mean, if you had a story where they're just crucifying guys because it's fun, I don't know how worth our time that would be.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
but where there's this redemptive element, all of a sudden, it's such a powerful medium to express things like the grace of God and the mercy of God and the compassion of God. If Adam and Eve don't fall and the world is never plunged into sin, you're not going to see the fullness of God's attributes on display. But with this horror that we're confronted with, we see clearly His grace, we as sinners.
Yeah.
Light shining
And
in the
it
darkness.
becomes that much more, what's the word? Enticing to us, exciting to us, valuable to us.
You see His justice on display. It's a beautiful thing in this horrible world full of horrors that go unpunished a lot of times.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
You start to see the full attributes of God on display, His mercy, His compassions.
And you can't have mercy without the horror.
Right.
Like,
That's correct.
What does it matter if you don't have the real consequence that you're under?
You might be able to understand it in a theoretical way, right? But you don't see it as clearly as we do.
I mean, think
like
about
this,
it
yeah.
in your personal experience. How effective has horror been in your life? How many you remember those things? Like when you're in a moment of horror, like real horror, like great fear, like those are things that stick in your mind.
That's true.
And those can have a big part in shaping your view of the world, your view of how to deal with things. And when we understand the God's wrath and how we're saved from it, I mean, like you're saying, it just makes it that much more precious to us, God's grace, when you knew where you were. I think, for example, one thing I've never been able to forget, my brother and his friend were watching Aliens, and I was like 6. And they let me watch the movie, and I had nightmares for years.
Really?
So that stuck with me for a really long time, and then I finally watched it again later when I was older, and I was like, why was I scared of this?
Yeah. My dad showed me Jaws when it came out, so I was probably 8 years old.
Oh, that would be so terrifying. See, that's an inappropriate way to introduce horror when you're at that point in your life.
Still remember my mother looking at him going, Marcus, I don't know if this is okay. So,
I don't ever want to get in the water again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, even in Jaws, I mean, that's kind of an over the top, but what it is expressing this is an accumulation of horror that you could deal with, and that there's a real problem. There's redemption in that because it's being destroyed. You have a hero saves the day, but you had a real terror. It was a really bad thing, and so I think there could be things taken out of that movie that would be helpful. But I think overall it can be a beneficial thing.
Well, and here again, the function of horror in story is it allows you to explore themes in a very real fashion and very binding fashion. So you have the interplay between Quint and Hooper, the young and the old, the educated and the fishermen, right? And that interplay in there really is brought out with this threat of this shark and men going out to fight against nature, so to speak. And then really the horror in that movie to me is not so much the shark, although it is significant, but you get this speech by Quint about the Indianapolis, and we delivered the bomb, and then a Japanese sub put 3 torpedoes in our side, and we went down in the water, and here's this real life account, okay? This really did happen, of all the sailors waiting because they're delivering the bomb, nobody knew where they were, really, or that it was a secret mission, so they're out in the water for a day or 2 days, and here come the sharks. So you get the real life horror inserted into this made-up story about this great white being up. It's very binding and serious real-world horror, in that sense, yeah. But it's got to have the redemptive and restorative qualities to it if we're going to be involved in it. I think the gratuitous all these movies where they just run around killing everybody. I don't think that's too good for us.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think a typical slasher has no redeeming quality, and that's a waste of your time. And really, you should not partake in something like that. Even if everything was clean, it's still a waste of your time.
It's just a waste of time. It's just got no redeeming. There's nothing in it for us. It's not shining the light on anything, at all. So.
Yeah. So I think kind of the takeaway here is that horror is a good thing if we use it to show the realities of the world. Like if we're using it to contrast the light, that's when it can be used well. So you mentioned when we were talking earlier before the show is a hell house.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's not a haunted house, but during Halloween, some people will put up these hell houses, and that's a pretty clever way of kind of bringing that in, because you're introducing horror, right? I mean, really terrible themes. I mean, you're not being gratuitous.
You might want to explain
gory.
what it is in case, because there's not many of them around anymore.
Yeah, and so it's terrible and horrifying because it's talking about this is what hell is like, right? Without Christ, this is what hell is like. So it's these people are being brought through some scenario. You were telling me about a specific one, but when you said that, it reminded me of something I had heard of before. But you're being brought through some different scenes, and as you're going through, you're seeing the desperation of total depravity. I mean, just being totally lost from God, and then you're seeing the contrast of what it looks like with God. And then at the very end of the story, now here comes the gospel.
Right.
Like you've seen the bad news, the terrible horror, like you saw it played out. And that's really terrifying. That's worse than the giant skeleton across the yard.
Yeah.
This is like real stuff. And then here's the light to get you out of this. This is Christ. Come to him, like repent. So that would be a great way to utilize it in a way that you can glorify God and still use elements of horror.
Yeah.
In a good way. And as long as you're balancing that right and presenting the positive, the good of Christ in there.
You talking about that also just kind of clicked off in my mind that this misuse of horror desensitizes us to the real horror, because there is real horror in this world. Like you were saying, hell is a real horror. And if you're without Christ, you are in imminent danger of it. But then we go out and play around with this Halloween stuff or whatever, and it desensitizes you, because it makes you think, well, all this horror's just make believe and it's playtime and it ain't real and all that, and it desensitizes me to the real horror that's going on in this world.
Yeah,
both practical and eternal, both temporal and eternal. So it's a really good point.
And it doesn't help that like I have all these different article feeds that come up, and most people are on social media or of some sort, and they're going to get dinged with stuff.
Right.
And there's so much horrific things that happen all around the world that I don't need to know about.
Right.
Like I don't need to know that this bus crashed on the other side of the world and all these people died. Like that's not beneficial for me.
Right.
I can't do anything about it. Those aren't people I know. Doesn't mean it makes you callous.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because I don't want to be callous towards those things. But when you are constantly bombarded by it from whatever your news source is, which we all have something that we're getting hit with, it does make you desensitized to the real horror around you, so that you miss
exactly
the real things. Like you become desensitized to the fact that, oh, somebody, just had a car wreck right there. Oh, well,
Well, you say my neighbor's house full of skeletons. And when I see that, what I ought to think is, wait a minute, I'm going to die one day and I'm going to be a skeleton. So I ought to live now in a way that's pleasing to my Savior. See? And I think, now that you mentioned, I think when people are walking around Halloween, when they see ghosts and spooks and scary things and all this, that's not what they're thinking about. But that's what they ought to be thinking about.
Yeah.
It ought to be a reminder. A skeleton ought to be a reminder that I'm going to die and that you're going to die. And that we have a duty to our Creator to live now, or if we don't know Him, to find Christ.
Yeah.
See, because that day is coming.
And for those of us, with young kids that are still training them up, So one thing I try to do is anytime I'm watching a show with them on TV, whatever, when something comes up, I usually pause it or I'll ask them and I talk about it and go, oh, is that right? They just said something that's not true. Or, hey, what was that person doing something good?
Right.
And so it's a challenge to get them to think about it the right way, framing it, and not being just callously bombarded with this stuff and becoming numb to it and thinking it's just normal. That ought to be what we're doing when we're walking around on Halloween too.
Yeah.
Or before Halloween when all the decorations are up and go, that should be grotesque to you. Like, look, kids, that's gross. That's not a good thing. And pointing to the fact that we are going to die, right? Like you just said, I think that'd be a great way for us to start framing it.
Yeah.
This is a temporary life, and one day you're going to be one of those too. You won't be that big and standing in somebody's yard, but you're going to die. And so how are you going to live your life now? Who are you focusing on? That kind of thing. I think that's a great tidbit to pull into that is really redirect our focus. And I think that's kind of what Halloween should be for Christians.
Maybe we start using it to preach the gospel, to evangelize, to remind people of their eternal destinies.
Yeah.
You
Hey, you got a giant skeleton in your yard. You know what's going to happen? When you die, you're going to turn into one of those. Where are you going?
Alas, poor Yorick. Okay. Yeah. Skull. It's all of our future if the Lord tarries. Okay. So yeah, that's maybe in about 9 or 10 months we ought to do a show about that very thing, and let's start gearing up for it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we'll put it on the docket.
All right.
Well, do you have any closing statements about horror? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think I'm good. You?
I'm good. I think we hit it. I think
I do too.
Takeaway is let's not be callous. Let's use horror to our advantage and to bring God glory through it, and not become fixated on it. And remember that the culture it loves death. It's going that way, but we're supposed to be salt and light.
Right.
And so we need to be different from them, and we need to be trying to contrast that horror with what Christ is, to be that light.
Yeah, whatever is pure, noble, and good, think on these things, right?
Right. Amen. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.